My guest is Agnes Kuhn, Quaker, activist, and extraordinary volunteer. Agnes has worked for numerous organizations and community projects with particular emphasis on children. She has helped with the Head Start program, a reading program at Longfellow School, community coordinated child care, a Sunday school teacher for the Friends meetings, community services volunteer at the Iowa City Public Library, president of the League of Women Voters, vice president for the local chapter of AARP, Meals on Wheels, Senior Center, 19th Century Club. I could go on and on. In 1986, she was named the Johnson County's Outstanding Senior Citizen by the Heritage Agency on Aging. Currently, Agnes helps serve lunch in the Senior Center dining room and takes her turn washing dishes in the kitchen. And if that isn't enough for an 85-year-old volunteer, Agnes daily hand feeds a gentleman suffering from multiple sclerosis. As my research assistant wrote, and I quote, Agnes has spent her life caring for people. She has strong principles and strong feelings about how people should be treated, as evidenced by her choice of work and volunteer activities. She represents some of the best aspects of American democratic ideals in action, end quote. Agnes and Manfred, a University of Iowa sociology professor, raised 6 children in Iowa City: Sylvalyn, Christopher Barkley, Linda, Gilbert, Deborah, and Abigail. Agnes has 7 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. Welcome to One of a Kind, Agnes. I know your story begins in Newberg, Oregon. You were born in December 1910. Tell me a little bit about your parents and what your father did.
Well, my father and mother had both graduated from Earlham College, and they were both Quakers and both interested in education, all angles of education. And therefore, Father, first he went to Oregon, where they were wanting a minister, I guess, a Quaker minister. And Father found that the Oregon Quakers were very conservative and had not the democratic approach that there is that of God in every person, but rather that the preacher carries the message. And so Dad chose to go to Kansas, where there was an opening in the Kansas University, and he could teach psychology. And there was just, he liked psychology, used it in his preaching, and so it was very simple for him to do that. And then he heard from New York City, the state of New York, that there was a need for a boarding school to have a headmaster, and since Father really is more of an educator than anything else, that appealed to him, and so they picked up again from Wichita, where my sister was born in Wichita, and went to Union Springs, New York, where there was this little so-called Quaker boarding school, but it was in dire straits. It was right at the time of the polio epidemic, and they were having lots of polio warnings. I can remember I felt that it was really shocking for the sick people to come into our house, exposing our family.
And your sister got polio, didn't
Yes,
she?
my sister got polio.
You had 5 siblings, and
Carrie was the one who got it.
Who got it and died from polio, and
Yeah.
you had have a brother who's still living in New York, is that right?
Yes, the youngest brother. But the old, Lindley, the older brother, just died. Diabetes is in the family, and apparently that is one of the things that is inherited.
So being a Quaker has been an important part of your character and your story all through your 85 years, hasn't it?
Yes.
And it's about service, isn't it?
Yes, that there is that of God in every person, and you want to so live to relate to that, and together we improve. But it was clear in my early days that I was kind of strong-willed. I spoke up in Friends meeting when I was only 13 about the fact that Father dominated the family, and I thought it was important to share.
Share this because your father left your mother at home. That was the time to care for the children, and he would go off and travel.
And she was a scientist, and well, I remember she had little pollywogs in this big glass bowl in the back of our room, and of course, and that's where we roller skated. It was a big house.
But she couldn't practice. I mean, she had to stay home.
She wanted to teach science, and she was not allowed. And she, well, she did try a while, but Father did not. He thought she should be at home to be hostess when the kids came over and all that stuff, and so.
Do you think this kind of spurred you on, Agnes, to kind of be your own person and do all the things that you eventually did?
I think it was in the air that
you
women,
felt she was unfared against.
Yes.
Because she was a woman.
Yes, because there was a lovely picture of her and Father getting on the train and going to Oregon, and I knew that she thought now she was going to be independent and teach, not depend on Father.
But you had a scholarship to Mount Holyoke, I read.
Yes, but yeah, the president of the board had connections. His daughter went there.
And majored in social work and history.
Yes.
And got your graduate degree there, I mean your undergraduate degree there. And then before graduate school, I read that you worked in a reform school.
Well, that was on my way home from commencement. We stopped at the New York State Training School for Girls, and Dad was, of course, at the top table, and we were talking with the headmistress, and she talked about how nice they were to the poor little girls, and it was a very cooperative community, but it didn't take me very long to realize that that was a false picture of the way things happened. I mean, the girls were treated like slaves, and I could hear them screaming. I couldn't figure out whether they were doing abortions on them or what it was, but it was.
Did you work for change that year, or
I tried to do subtle things, and I worked with in the garden with them, and instead of just standing over them, and they were very upset about that because I'm used to
the officials were,
yes,
not the girls, but the officials
but I'm used to the democratic approach, and that you trust people and they respond. You know, they didn't run away from me.
So after this 1 year in the reform school, which I'm sure taught you a great deal about the unfairness of life, you went to Pendle Hill in Wallingford, Pennsylvania, and this is where you met your husband, Manfred.
Yes. My dad thought that would be a good place for me, that it was obvious I had too much tension with Mother, and it would be good for me to get away.
So you got married, and your husband got a job in the sociology department at the University of Iowa.
Yeah.
And you moved to Iowa, and did you get involved immediately, or were you busy having children?
Well, first we bought that house in Riverside, and since my husband had polio, you see, Dad and Eleanor Roosevelt, not Dad, my sister and Eleanor were my sister and Franklin were the polio victims for the Dutchess County, New York State. And so Eleanor would visit. The birthdays were October 13th, so this is why October is a special time for me, because she'd come and visit my sister.
Eleanor did.
Eleanor did. So
she's one of your heroes, isn't she?
Yeah, we knew each other very well. She came to Mount Holyoke when I was there. I invited her to come and speak to our international relations. So.
What drew you to Eleanor? Why is she one of your heroes?
Because she has a beautiful balance of doing the best she can with her life and willing to cooperate with her husband. See, even though her mother-in-law dominated the scene, I mean, we'd visit there, and it was Sarah, was never Eleanor, was noted. And yet she did not get bitter when Franklin called for her to help him in his campaign. She just was a good sport.
She was a good sport.
She didn't whimper, she coped.
Like your mother?
Yes, just make the best of it. And I think those were times when it was very hard for women. It's much easier now than it was then.
So getting back to Iowa City, you moved to Riverside and started raising a family. And And got involved and started to get involved in League of Women Voters?
Yes, I was getting people to come and vote. And the kids heard me saying that I had only 4 children. They said, why did you drop out some? And I said, it just looks so ridiculous because people don't have that many kids.
So you had 6 children, and you told people you had only 4, but you thought you'd be a little bit more believable?
Yes, well, because people lied to me. I mean, I knew that they didn't have as many children as they said. That was their excuse for not working for the League and getting out the vote. So I was having to do all that running around.
You were knocking on doors and asking people to go vote for a special election.
And I was taking, you know, Abby around the buggy and all that kind of stuff.
And and then you were helped. What did you do for Phil? There's a story about you and Phil Hubbard in University Heights.
That's because Phil wanted to move. I knew Helen Lemmy very well, and she told me there was a problem up there in University Heights because Phil Hubbard wanted to buy a house there, and they there was something in the code that forbade black people from buying in that area, and so I had to go from house to house to see whether they would accept Phil and his wife in their neighborhood. And there was only one person who was a professor who was
against it?
Was very enthusiastic about it. He was sure the quality of life would go down.
So what happened?
Well, he would be willing for them to try it.
To try it.
And it was a very successful.
So you spent a lot of time knocking on doors and urging people to get involved?
Yes, to go vote and all that kind of stuff, because I was in the League of Women Voters.
Well, what did your husband think with these 6 children, and he had a full-time job at the university, when you wanted to run for president of the League of Women Voters, which is no small task?
Well, he knew that I had this itch to do things, and there wasn't anything could do about it. He designed the Who Am I test that I tell you about.
Now tell me about this.
He was so impressed in Madison that to discover that the kids who came from rural schools seemed to adapt to the university schedule and settle down and work right away much better than the city kids. And so he designed the Who Am I questions. The first 6 things that you say about yourself reveal a whole bunch. And so he experimented with that when he got here. He was invited here because of Alex Kern, who had roomed with him in Madison, and Alex said, would you come? And so he tried it on the university school, and the kids just goofed off, want to be a bear or a monkey or something. But the ones who were very sober and sensible were the Amish kids, and they really had a goal. They wanted to be farmers, and that was my husband was still trying to work on accurate statistical measurement of this Who Am I, but he never got beyond the first 6 things that you say reveal the most about you.
And your maybe success rate in school?
Yes,
and how well you adapt?
Coping with society, you know, getting going on things.
Well, your husband died at quite a young age, in the 60s, I read.
Yeah, 53.
He was 53, and you went back and got another degree in special education and taught for many years in Solon. Was this?
I didn't teach too many years. I
mean, you didn't?
I mean, I taught as long as I could, but I resigned when I was, what is the age limit? 55.
65?
65, because I thought the new people needed to have a right to it. But I had been convinced by my work with my own children, and then in schools, that the earlier you get at kids, the better, and that's why I'm really hooked on Head Start, and I really want that to continue, because...
Let's talk about this interest you have in the young child, because so much of your story is like teaching special needs children, Head Start, the force, is it called Child Community Coordinated Child?
Coordinated Community Child
Tell me,
Care.
what is this, what's the pull for this to your
Because
children?
the earliest years in your life are most amenable to change, and kids are eager to learn. If you watch little kids, they really want to they want to grow up and they want to participate earlier than they are able to. And of course, it was a very moving experience for me to work in the 2 Head Start programs, because there you're right in with what's going on inside of them.
What did you do with them? Would you read and?
Yeah, and played games with them. We had, when I was doing it the last time, they had a half an hour in which the kids played by themselves, and they could figure out, make their own activity, choose their own. And I was appalled that there was a great rumpus going behind the folding screen at the back of the room. And so I finally went back there and asked the little girl, what's going on? She said, sex. You know, this was a 4-year-old.
Yes.
But that's all that they see. So, you know, the parents are working for money, and we were told that there's no sense in your trying to get a hold of us to pick up the kids. You have them from 8:30 on till 5, because there won't be anybody at home.
8:30 to 5, preschoolers.
Yeah, because there's nobody at home to take care of them. And that does explain a lot of the trouble that we're having now with young people. And I don't like the idea of building more prisons. I just think we need to take better care of the young families. These are the ones that are getting neglected.
You were there for hours. You got the most hours volunteer in 81 and 83 and 85.
Well, it's an exciting place because you can see change. And they're really eager to make pictures and to, well, and that time when I had them doing their own paper, that was really something.
And tell me, you were also involved in a program at Longfellow, helping children who were slow learners to read.
Yes.
Tell me about this program.
Well, it is a great advantage to be alone with the children. I'll never forget that little boy who was struggling along, and he said, well, you know, Mrs. Kuhn, I just have half a brain. There really isn't any way I can learn to read. I said, come on, we'll just read one sentence at a time. And then I set up this committee. I forget whether I've told you that yet or not.
No.
That would write their own paper. And they said, oh, we can't do that. I said, yeah, here's a machine, and I will duplicate what you tell me to say was the most important thing you learned this week. And they were willing to give up their recess to come and sit with me and talk about what they wanted, what they had most fun with this week. And that was fun.
So now let's move a little up the age ladder. You got involved in the senior center. And were you on the AARP board when they bought the post office and moved the senior center there? And you had an idea to have young people, preschoolers there.
Well, there was extra space, and they were going to have clay. Well, I knew that nobody, there's nothing like kids to figure out what to do with clay. And that was my suggestion. But it didn't go through. Well, I think they were afraid the kids would make too much noise and whatever.
You're still writing letters, Agnes. I read every so often in the newspapers, you're still writing letters to the editor.
Well, it's very important. Democracy won't work unless you keep in touch with unless we keep in touch with our legislators and show them what we feel, because they can't see the whole thing. We need to share.
And did you help get the Friends meeting place here in Iowa City in Manfred? Yes,
because we felt that it was appropriate in this university town where there's cross-section of all kinds of people that we didn't want to spend time every Sunday driving to West Branch, and that we had a responsibility and opportunity here in town.
What's your advice to people? Like, you don't have a car anymore, but you're still going down to the senior center, you're still helping with this gentleman who's handicapped. What's your advice to people who want to get involved and maybe are hesitant and feel they're to this or to that?
Well, there's always room for somebody who will share in the responsibilities. For instance, we have lots of duties in the kitchen room and the dish room. And there's so many people, I can see their backs are getting stooped. Well, your back gets stooped partly because you are just sitting there worrying about how you feel instead of just participating, and you feel much better when you can do something for somebody else rather than just sit there and think about yourself.
You must not think too much about your health then.
No, I think I'm lucky. That's one fact that I have to admit, because I haven't.
You walk to your volunteer job through all kinds of weather. I've seen you.
I did not want to give up. Didn't realize what I was giving up when I gave up my car. But the kids told me they thought it was high time.
Let's talk about your children. I know you, like your mother, raised 6 children. Your oldest daughter, Sylvelyn Eleanor, died of leukemia, you told me before the interview. And then your next son is Christopher Barkley, who went to the University of Iowa and has children, is that right?
Oh, yes. Barkley has, he is adopting children all the time. He really has bothered me because first he thought he would help the blind people. He began working with them, and he said, well, they just know how to dig in and help themselves. So he married a blind girl, and then he works for the State Department now, and he realized that there was a place where they put children who are born addicted to cocaine. So he found this little boy. A lady keeps them for that first year, and then you get them. And so he has that little boy. So
he inherited his mother's social
urge instead of. See, I assumed that he would go ahead with his graduate degree and teach history or whatever, but instead this is what he wants to serve. And he's adopted Tara, who is a black girl who's been in 6 different homes, but she's very bright, and she helps him handle little Christopher, who, you know, they're hyperactive when they're born on that cocaine, but he's
working through this. And then your daughter Linda you told me, is in Washington. And has children. And
I was so amazed, she said she thought this man who ran the apple orchard was, she couldn't figure out what he was doing watching her. I mean, he kept being interested.
And that they ended up marrying.
Yes, and it's a good combination.
And then your Gilbert, to move through these children, Gilbert is a social worker with the federal government.
Yes.
And Deborah Elizabeth teaches in Illinois.
Yeah. She and her husband run the history department in the university there.
Wonderful. And then your youngest daughter, Abigail?
She's the one who was in Montana and had represented the Quakers at a visit in Norway. And she had written to me how wonderful it is everybody rides a bike. Well, she lived on Glacial Mountain, right at the foot of the mountain, and it was on Labor Day weekend, and she came back riding her bike and was killed. And she's the one who had these 2 great kids. Her older boy is called Catnip because she was drinking catnip tea when she was pregnant.
When she was pregnant. And the other child's name is?
Let's see, Catnip and Eli.
Eli.
Yeah. And Eli's just graduating. He's graduated this year from high school. He was suspended because he put contraceptives on the float because he was making fun of
somebody else is protesting, just like the grandmother.
He thought they were really, you know, their sex education was a joke. It was not genuine
Sarah's
enough.
bringing that to the attention. Agnes, my last question to you is, of all the things you've done, you have your finger in so many areas of Iowa City, is there one area that has meant the most to you?
Oh, it's very hard, but I really think that dealing with children in those first 6 years are a very exciting experience, and they determine a lot of the future. And I'd so much prefer that we would be investing in more adequate care of the small children rather than building prisons. I think that a positive emphasis to the joys of life motivates the young families to do a better job than they would otherwise, because it's fun.
Well, we've been lucky to have had you in Iowa City all these years, and thank you for being my guest.
It's fun. I love Iowa City.
I know.
It keeps on growing.
I know. Thank you, Agnes.
You're welcome.
My guest on One of a Kind has been Agnes Kuhn. Whether she is assisting the young in learning to read, writing letters to the editor, protesting discrimination, celebrating peace, working for social change, or slogging through the rain and sleet to volunteer, her mission in life has been to help and serve others. As an admirer and friend remarked, Agnes is our social conscience. Agnes Kuhn is one of a kind.